On Living on the Edge with Chip Ingram.
Mom, I want to go. I gotta go. Everyone who's anybody is really going to go. And, you know, I'll shut my eyes on the parts that I think are really kind of bad. And don't you trust me? I mean, I'm 15 years old. I'm 16 years old. Don't you trust me? Come on, Mom. No, honey.
Are you struggling with one of your children? Maybe one of your older children? Maybe a preteen or a teenager that you're having battles at home? There's real rebellion, there's arguments, they don't do what you say. Well, I gotta tell you, I've been there. Went through a real season with one of my children where they went through a difficult time of rebellion. Teresa and I were often up late into the night talking about what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, what should we do next? Today on Living on the Edge, we're talking about effective parenting in a defective world. And we're talking about disciplining, especially disciplining those that are older. And you don't want to miss this because at the end of the broadcast, that son that went through a pretty significant rebellious streak is going to come and share his journey for you parents to help you learn what helped him get back on track. In fact, my wife is even going to take a little moment and talk about what happened in her heart and sort of some of our struggles and also some of the victories that come when you follow God's plan. Stay with me.
My dad would use lots of words, sometimes action, disciplinary action, to help keep us on a path that was one that he thought was right for us. And when I was in high school, I reached a point where you know, his words were not doing and getting the results that he wanted because of my wanting to go off and ride motorcycles and have fun with friends instead of going to school, skipping class all the time and messing around with guys that were into drugs and that sort of thing. I got kicked out of the school as a result of, you know, my school behavior. My father took that opportunity to say, okay, you want to be, you know, Mr. Big Shot, go out there, run your own life, you got it all together, you got it all figured out. We're going to send you out into the world so you can live on your own. And he felt he needed to get me away from that environment and away from those people that I was hanging around with at the time. So he lined up a job for me in Lincoln, Nebraska. We were living in Florida. And all he gave me was, you know, because he knew I wanted to be on my own and I was Mr. Big Shot, all he gave me was just a $100 bill, a one-way plane ticket to Lincoln, Nebraska, and a phone number for the YMCA there so that when I got there I could just figure out that's the place where I should stay. So a day and a half later I was on that plane, spent a whole day making connections and flying all the way out to Lincoln, and ended up staying at the YMCA. My response initially was, hey, this is great. I'm out in the world now, I'm on my own, everything's perfect. And it was over the course of the next 2.5 months that I realized that that was not the path that I wanted to be on. I was surrounded by more drug people, more odd, strange, criminal type people. And I was all by myself, and they're older, and they're driving cars, and I didn't have one, and, you know, it was just, the whole thing was just, you know, spooky and eye-opening in ways that I had never been, you know, never seen before. And so then that's when I realized that I don't want to be out in the world. I want to go back. I want to be under my father's authority. I want to go to school. I want to get an education and do all those things. And so I decided to go around the right end and sneak back home. So I got some money from my grandfather and bought a ticket and flew back home without my dad even knowing it. And of course, like the prodigal son, when I arrived, even though it was a surprise to him, he embraced me. And then I guess he just sat back to see if I was going to do what I said, and I ended up graduating high school with my class, going on to 4 years of college, graduating from there, and ended up going back down the path that my father knew was probably the right one anyway. If he hadn't taken this risk with his actions, it's very possible that I would have either ended up on drugs or in jail or dead, one of those three things. But he, because of his convictions, felt it was worth the risk that for me to get a dose or a taste of that path that I was headed down, and I guess hope and pray that I would change and turn around and come back. And I did.
The word in Hebrew says we need to bring about the rod to produce the kind of behavior that will help our children walk with Him and be obedient. And the words are clear instruction. The idea is reproof or correction. Notice Proverbs 3:11 through 12, quoted earlier. It says, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline," those actions, "and do not resent His rebuke," the words, "because the Lord disciplines those He loves, and as a father in every son in whom He delights." And what I want to do under the words here is just highlight how to use words to bring about correction. Because quite honestly, you really don't need to spank very much, especially if you start early and are consistent. But let me give you 4 ways to use your words to bring about correction. Way number 1 is say no firmly. All right? Say no firmly. Has this ever played out in your house? Mom, there's a few of us that want to go to this movie. You know the movie. You've seen the clip on it. It's R-rated. You know the girl she wants to go with. Mom, can we go to this movie? You know, I heard, you know, I know you don't say this about R movies and this and that, but I've heard it's really clean, and I think it's going to be okay, and your response is, "Oh, honey, you know, I don't think so." Message, there's room to wiggle here. "Oh, Mom, I want to go. I gotta go. Everyone who's really going to go. And, you know, I'll shut my eyes on the parts that I think are really kind of bad. And don't you trust me? I mean, I'm 15 years old. I'm 16 years old. Don't you trust me? Come on, Mom." "No, honey, I just don't think it's..." And you have now drifted down a trail, and the confrontation you're going to have is bad. You know why? You didn't say no firmly. Now, you know these girls. You know that movie, and you know in your heart of hearts that's bad. And you know what? When she said, "Mom, can I go?" "Honey, I'm sorry, absolutely not. That is not a good movie. That's not the kind of things that I want going into your mind, number 1. And number 2, we've talked about what those girls do and where they're going to end up." "Oh, Mom, I don't understand why." "Honey, I'm glad you asked that. Come over and sit down, okay?" And you sit down with her and you say, "Look, sweetheart, I love you very much. I know there's a lot of pressure. I know it might mean a lot to you. But here," and you sit down and you read a passage or 2, maybe Proverbs 13:20. And it says that the companion of a fool will suffer harm. But blessed is he who trusts in the Lord. Is that wise men will dwell with wise men, but the companions of fools will end up in the ditch. Those are loose Ingram translations of those verses. And you say, "I just love you too much, and I understand." Now, is the issue you want to go to a movie? You and I want to go to one? You know, if you're not sure, can I go? If it's a PG something, and maybe this, maybe that, the responsible kids, you're not really sure, try this one. Can I go? You know what? I don't know. I need to pray about it. I don't feel good about it, but I do want to trust you. So let me do a little more research. And if you're a 2-parent family, let me talk to your dad. And then, you know, here's a great one. She's 15. "Honey, I'll tell you what. Would you take some time between now and tomorrow and you pray about it? I would like what God would say to you." Let the string out on the kite, right? Why should you be the bad person all the time? Do you think this is a good movie? What's in it? Why don't you ask the Lord? What do you think He would have you do? I've had a number of occasions. I've done that with my kids, and I was leaning toward, well, you know, they're pretty responsible, and I think and they've come back and said, "You know, Dad, I don't think the Lord wants me to go." I'm going, all right. Second, spank age appropriately, okay? I mean, I'm mixing the words, but if the no firmly doesn't work, then you get rebellion, then spank appropriately in sequence. And then third here is the whole idea of contracts. As your kids get older and they get into these preteens and teenage years, you know, you don't want to have all these power struggles. One of the things that happens with parents is we allow ourselves to be the authority all the time, and what we're really trying to do is transfer the trust to them. Well, there's a way to do that. You know, how many things do you really bump heads on? There's only 4 or 5, right? Chores at home, how they treat their siblings, schoolwork, talking back. You could probably get, it's not like there's a million things that you parent on and you have conflict. Figure out what are the top 5 things that you always struggle with. You know, cleaning up your room or whatever it is that really, get a sheet of paper out and write on one side what the behaviors are that always cause conflict. And then rather than you be the bad person in all this conflict, sit down at the table. You've prayed, might even fast on this one. You're clothed, you're in your right mind. You love your kid and you say, you know something, we've got real conflict over your room. And every week, you know, I love you too much. Why do we always argue about this? Tell you what, why don't you think, and I'd like you to write on the other side of this line, if your room isn't how we agree that it needs to be, why don't you write on this side of the line what the consequences are? Okay, we'll come up with a contract. What do you think it ought to be? I mean, here's my question. What would help you obey? I don't like yelling at you. You don't like yelling at me. What would help you obey? And it's amazing. Well, you know, if I couldn't play in the next basketball game if I didn't take care of that, boy, that would motivate me. Is that the one you want? Yeah, okay. Okay, how about this one? You know, you're beating up your brother. You got all this sarcastic stuff come out of your mouth. What would help you obey? You tell me. And you sit down and you make a contract. And then you sign it. And this is very effective, 12, 13, 14, 15, and beyond. And do you see how words can be powerful in terms of making a contract? And then the final one is just the extension of that is consequences. And this is when you're in a situation that life is really hard, really bad, and you've got a child that you feel like is pretty out of control. And I have parents say, I don't know what to do. She's running around. She didn't come home last night. I mean, everything's terrible in our home. There's nothing I can do. She's 16 and a half, and I'm so concerned. And what's going on? I am powerless. And so I just ask some diagnostic questions like, well, as she's running around doing all these things, whose car is she driving? And who's putting gas in the car? And who pays for the insurance? And whose room is she sleeping in? I mean, just give me a couple clues here. Who's buying the food that she's eating? And could you help me out on, she's probably got a full-time job living in your house at 16 and a half and buying all of her clothes and everything else, right? Don't tell me you're not powerless. Now, you may not have the spine to be the parent you need to be, and you may have never been aware that that was the problem, and God's not down on you. But honey, if you got a daughter or a son who's totally out of control, I got news for you. Those keys go here. The money comes here. This comes here. And they will live under your roof with the right kind of attitude, respectful to you and to the other kids in the house. And when their behavior demonstrates that they're ready to get that responsibility back, fantastic. And until then, that's the way it is. Flip over the page and let me just give you a few very practical ways to walk through this. Here's some practical tips for balanced parenting. Tip number 1 is, these are to avoid, and we've touched on them, so I want to highlight them just so you can go back for application. Number 1, avoid the pitfall of the screaming parent. The screaming parent. The screaming parent means that someone's out of control, it's not your child. Number 2, the all-talk parent. This is both sexes, but especially moms who lay across the bed and talk, and kids are so shrewd and manipulative, they'll let you get it out of your system. You've had this big talk, behavior never changes, but you think something happened because you listened to her innermost feelings or his innermost feelings about why he's disobeying and how hard life is. And you walk out the room, they go, got that taken care of. Third is the abusive parent. I touched on this. You may have been through a rough time. You may have anger issues. If you are laying your hand on your kid, or you're tempted to, or you feel like you're ready to burst and out of control, go get help. Just go get help. Just go get help. There is help available. Go to your pastor and say, hey, I need help. And go to a good Christian counselor, but don't lay your hands on your kids. This is a cycle, and chances are probably someone did it to you. And we're just passing it on from generation to generation. We've got to stop that. And good, loving people will not say, oh, you're a terrible person. You feel like a terrible person already, go get help. And then number 4 is what I call the closed lip parent. And men, we tend to be the one here. You see all this chaos happening, and your wife keeps saying, there's a problem with her, honey. You know what, I think our son, I don't think he's in the wrong crowd. And, we pull down the paper and go, oh, kids go through this. He'll grow out of it. She'll grow out of it. And it's called denial. And there's certain parents that so don't want conflict that they're just passive and they don't say anything. And it won't go away. It's like cancer, it's going to grow. And then finally is what I call the light bulb parent. And the light bulb parent is, they get all fired up about parenting, and here's the expectations, they lay them out and they say, this is the way it is on Monday, okay, does everyone understand? Yes, 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 and the kids start to move that way. Then on Wednesday, oh no, we can't do that. Oh, it's okay, you know, it's all right. And so light on, light off, light on, light off, light on, light off. The kids are going, you know, I got a headache here. And so they'll watch you and figure out what days the light is on or which parent they can go to. They're smart. And you'll be miserable. What I want to do is give you a game plan, and then I want to share that this isn't theoretical at all. The game plan is, number one, identify the top 2 behavior problems in your home. You know, just, I mean, is it chores? Is it talking back? Is it disrespect? Is it violating standards? I don't know. They shouldn't be too difficult to come up with. Then second, honestly evaluate your present parenting pattern. Remember when I said, are you too permissive or too strict? Go back in those 4 quadrants now with a little openness and say, which one of these really represent who I am? And then you've got to ask yourself, what part of this problem is me instead of my kid? That's a tough one to do, but it's critical. And then you address your issues before you do with your kids. And then number 3, once you do that, then you have a family conference. And we could spend a lot of time on how to do a family conference, but I always like to sit on the floor when they were young and around the kitchen table later, and then you just walk through the very normal process of identifying we have a problem. You're prayed up and you're not mad. And you say, this is the problem. And then you talk about where you own anything where you say, you know, I've said, you know, I've not been consistent, and, you know, I've not been the dad I need to be, and these behaviors have been happening, but I've exercised no discipline. I've asked God to forgive me. I want to ask you kids to forgive me. And then I identify this action will be taken in the future when this behavior keeps happening. And I'm going to try and be real faithful to God. And I'm warning you because I love you. Under control. When this happens in the future, this is what's going to occur. When they're young. When they're older, you sit down and you write that contract out at that family conference. Or you set this wild one down and say, okay, here's the consequences. And we can't tolerate this in our home anymore. And you lay that out. And then you join hands together, and then you pray. Now, I told you this wasn't theoretical, and I'm going to ask my son to come help me in a minute. But it's interesting. He now is a full-time musician in ministry. Has traveled literally all over the country and parts of the world doing music and sharing Christ. And you would just think he's one of those good, nice young men who have always been that way. And I figured out how to make him crazy. And he figured out how to make me crazy. And he knew my buttons, and he would push him, and we were in deadlock. And he was in rebellion for about 4 years. And he was the one that sat next to me in the car, and I basically said, either you straighten up or you move out. And he went back to his bedroom, literally. It was like a cave. I didn't see him for a couple days. And I'll never forget, I was passing into my bedroom, and he came out, and his countenance was different. And I thought, maybe something had happened. But he's so smart that he learned that if he really wanted something, he could change his behavior for 10 days or a week to get whatever he wanted, and then I got suckered in again. And that's really made me mad again. But I watched. So for 2 weeks, he had this good attitude. And then for 3 weeks, he had this good attitude. And then I watched kind of a 180, and I watched God work in his life. And then I watched his goals and his dreams change. And then finally, I said, son, what happened? And get this, you know, he's like late 17. What do you mean, what happened? We've been doing battle for 4 years. Like, what happened? And I'm thinking to myself, I bet it's that last big talk we had. I bet he listened to one of my great sermons that I gave on Sunday morning, and the Spirit of God took it and burst truth and life in him. And rather than me tell you what happened, I've asked my son Jason to sing a song that he wrote for me and his mother. We were in a Saturday night service, and he shocked us at the end of the service, and at the very end, he sang this song, and we had never heard it. In this song, he really tells what God did in his heart. And after all that we'd been through, God had knit our hearts back together. And this song, I think, is a great message for every parent who's ever been through any hard time about where to keep the focus. Jason?
So now you know that I'm the one who put all the gray hair on my dad. But I think it helps give him some, dignity as he's speaking. So there was a purpose. But I wrote this song because, as you heard, there was about 4 years of my life where we butted heads every day, and neither of us ever wanted to be around the other one. And what I finally realized was that what I didn't like about my dad was I didn't like that he was a Christian. And he was a neat guy, and people liked him, and I really liked him, but this whole Christianity thing really cramped my style, and I just didn't want anything to do with it. And so when it finally came to a head, is like he said when I came to him and said just that very thing, that I know you're a pastor, this is probably not going to go over too well with the congregation, but I don't want anything to do with Christianity. And the response to that was, I think, what God used to absolutely do a 180 in my life. And what I realized, like he said, he went his way, and I went mine to try and figure out what I was going to do. And what I saw was just incredible brokenness. It wasn't anger. There was never, oh, what are people going to think? Or, oh, what could this mean to my job? It was just incredible brokenness. And as I was thinking about why that was, what I realized was that my dad wasn't trying to teach me anything other than, it wasn't trying to teach me to believe something. It wasn't trying to make me into this thing. He wanted to share with me the thing that was the most precious thing that he had ever been given. And that was this relationship with the Heavenly Father. And that was the thing in his life that gave him breath, that gave him life, that gave him a reason to live, that gave him a reason to parent, that gave him a reason to put up with me. And it was like, oh my gosh, maybe there is something there, because I don't know how he's done it. And so I began to just pray, Lord, if this is real, then show me. So you've heard a lot that you need to model, and that faith is something that's caught, not taught. And that's what this song is about. This here's a story of my testimony, a song to say thanks to my mom and dad. When I was a young boy, they gave to me the most precious gift a young boy like me could ever have. It was not the words they said, but how they lived. Because of the love you poured out on me, you gave up your life to take care of my every need. And every night I saw you on your knees, praying for me that I might believe. Because of your love, because of your love, yeah, yeah. Because of your love, because of your love, yeah, yeah. That I first believed. As I look back to my childhood, I never had the most toys or the biggest yard. The one thing much bigger that you gave to me was your love and your time, and you lived your belief. It was not the words you said, but how you lived. Because of the love you poured out on me, you gave up your life to take care of my every need. And every night At the end of the day, as much as I was frustrated at everything, I loved him to death. I would never want him to know that. I would never want to tell him that. I would never want to show him that. But even then, as a really angry and frustrated 17-year-old, I still loved my family to death.
And the Lord gave me a promise in Isaiah, and it says, "And all your children shall be taught of the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children." And I held on to that promise.
I don't even really think it came down to parenting strategies as far as how to do this or that. I think it came down to a lot more of just being a man that loved the Lord and wanted his son to have that.
Because